Hello everyone, and welcome to a brand new campaign in Hearts of Iron 4 Black Ice as Turkey. This marks yet another chapter in our ongoing grand campaign. From the rise of the empire in European Vassals 4 MEIOU Taxes, through the painful decline in Victoria II TGC, and the surprising resurgence during Hearts of Iron 4 The Great War, we now turn to a new and critical era in the story of the Ottomans, now reborn as the Republic of Turkey, standing at the crossroads of Europe and Asia in the year 1936. At the helm of this new forged nation stands Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the father of the modern Turkish state. A visionary general who turned defeat into triumph, Atatürk led the Turkish resistance to victory in the War of Independence that followed World War I, and from the ashes of a fractured empire, he forged a secular, modern republic. Through the 1920s and early 1930s, Atatürk launched sweeping reforms that aimed not only to modernize Turkey, but to sever its ties with the Ottoman past. The caliphate was abolished, the Arabic script replaced by Latin alphabet, religious courts were dismantled, and even the traditional fez was banned. Women were granted rights once unimaginable in the Sultan's realm, years before many Western countries did the same. A new civil code, modeled after the Swiss system, laid the foundation for a secular state governed by laws rather than decrees. Education was overhauled, industry was centralized, and the nation began to walk the long and difficult road towards modernization. These were not just cosmetic changes, they were core shifts in Turkish identity, imposed with clarity, purpose, and clear goals. But modernization came with its own philosophical edge. Atatürk, while staunchly opposed to Hitler's racial ideologies, shared a deep belief in societal Darwinism, the notion that nations, like species, must evolve or perish. He saw the world as an unforgiving arena of politics where weakness meant death. If Turkey was to survive, it could not rely on sentiment or nostalgia. It needed strength, it needed discipline, and it needed strategic foresight, and most of all, it needed guidance. And so we arrive at our campaign. As before, I held several community polls about how we are going to steer Turkey. You can see all of them on my channel page. This time, you, the viewers, have voted for an authoritarian path forward. We will remain loyal to Atatürk's vision of self-sufficient, independent, if authoritarian Turkey that will focus on free market and trade, but we will also align ourselves with the Axis. Not for ideological kinship, as we have little of that, but out of cold geographical calculation. The Allies view us as a broken relic that will fall in time on its own, and the Soviets eye us with ambition and greed. If we are to thrive in the gathering storm, we must choose our battles carefully and forge strength through alliances, not pity. And who better to help us regain more land and power than a nation that hungers for the same? Yet, the task ahead is monumental. Our army is pitiful and antiquated. Our military industry is meager, and our civilian economy effectively frozen under the crushing legacy of Ottoman imperial debt. While better than in our Great War campaign, it is still burdened and ineffective. Historically, the 1920s and 30s were consumed by efforts to reclaim control from foreign creditors and commissions that had turned the late empire into a financial protectorate. That struggle continues for us, first in our economy and later on the battlefield as we will claim new resources to grow. We now stand at a geopolitical crossroad. The Balkans are volatile, but when is that not true? The Soviet Union looms in the north. The Mediterranean simmers with imperial ambitions. From these fault lines, a new power must rise, and we will be that power. This is going to be our 1936 Turkey campaign in Hearts of Iron 4 Black Ice. With this short introduction behind us, let's talk structure. As always, we'll begin this first episode with an overview of the modern history of the post-World War I Turkey, to better understand our position. We'll then dive into the in-game situation, reviewing our economy, army, diplomatic options, resources, research, and so on. This phase will take up the entirety of the episode, so if you're here only for action, feel free to skip ahead to episode 2, where the actual gameplay begins. For those of you who enjoyed the planning phase and historical depth, stay with me here because we've got a lot to unpack. To help with that, I added tags to the video so you can see the various sections for easier navigation. Also, a quick heads up, the early game will involve a lengthy build-up. Turkey is in no shape to join the global war immediately. Our strategy must be patient, calculated, and well aligned with world events. Rushing into a conflict will get us crushed. We must prepare, industrialize, modernize, and then strike with purpose with whatever limited resources we will muster. Our German and Italian allies won't benefit from a partner who will collapse after their first offensive. Now, let us talk history. When the guns of the First World War fell silent in 1918, the Ottoman Empire was in ruin. Over 6 centuries of imperial rule had come to an end with a single signature. The terms of Armistice of Mudros, signed on October 30th, 1918, were devastating. The Ottoman military was ordered to demobilize, Allied forces were granted full access to strategic locations, and within weeks, British, French, Italian, and Greek troops were marching across Anatolia, occupying ports, railways, and even Istanbul itself. Then came the Treaty of Sèvres in 1920, a humiliation so absolute it barely stopped short of abolishing the empire outright. The treaty carved Anatolia into several zones. The Greeks were given Izmir and most of the Aegean coast, Armenia was promised vast eastern lands, France and Italy divided the south, and Kurdish autonomy was floated in the east. Istanbul itself remained in Ottoman hands, but in truth, the government there was just a puppet under Allied occupation. It could have ended there, but from the rugged interior, an organized resistance took shape, not in the name of the Sultan, but in the name of survival of Turkey. Mustafa Kemal Pasha, a brilliant and defiant former general of the Ottoman army, emerged as the leader of this national awakening. Dispatched to Samsun in 1919 to oversee the disarmament of the local forces, he instead used his post to rally support. From Sivas to Erzurum, nationalist congresses were held, and in 1920 the Grand National Assembly was convened in Ankara, declaring itself the legitimate government of the Turkish nation. This was not just rhetoric, this was war. Between 1919 and 1922, the Turkish War of Independence raged on multiple fronts. In the east, nationalist forces clashed with Armenian troops, eventually forcing the Treaty of Alexandropol, reclaiming eastern Anatolia. In the south, a low-level but fierce conflict with French colonial forces in Cilicia led to their withdrawal. And in the west, the most existential threat, a full-scale invasion by Greece, backed by the Allies. The Greek army advanced deep into Anatolia, even reaching the outskirts of Ankara, but they overreached. In 1922, the Greek army was decisively crushed at the Battle of Dumlu Pilar. Turkish forces surged westwards, retaking Izmir and driving the invaders into the sea. In a dramatic turn, the Allies, tired, overstretched, and unwilling to escalate further after the horrors of the First World War, agreed to renegotiate. The Treaty of Sèvres was abolished, and in its place, the Treaty of Lausanne was signed in 1923, recognizing the Republic of Turkey as the legitimate successor to the Ottoman Empire. The foreign occupation ended, and the humiliating capitulations were abolished. And for the first time in centuries, Anatolia was sovereign again. It is worth mentioning that Turkey is thus the only nation defeated in the First World War that managed to overturn the dictate of the Entente and manifest its own will. The Sultanate was abolished in 1922, and Sultan Mehmed VI fled aboard a British warship. The caliphate would follow 2 years later, and in 1923, Ankara, not Istanbul, was declared the new capital of a republic born from the war and steeled by necessity. As a side note, There's an old joke that before Atatürk spotted the city of Ankara, it was just known as a place where cats were bred. While preparing this text, I looked into it and turns out that the old name for Ankara is Angora, which is the original of the Angora or Turkish Angora, a breed of cat also known as the Ankara cat. So it's not a joke at all, especially as the city had only 35,000 inhabitants in 1924, but nearly 300,000 in 1950, 1.5 million in 1973, and today the estimation is anywhere between 5.5 and 6 million people. However, back to the history. The Ottoman twilight we just discussed gave way to the dawn of the Kemalist era. On 29th of October 1923, the Republic of Turkey was proclaimed. The Ottoman Sultanate, once the terror of Europe and the guardian of Islam, was abolished by a single decree. The caliphate, a cornerstone of Islamic authority, was dissolved just months later in 1924. The capital moved from Imperial Istanbul to Ankara, a dusty Anatolian town symbolizing rupture with the imperial past and a rebirth in the Anatolian heartland. With this, the long arc of Ottoman imperial history has closed, and a new uncertain chapter began. But independence was not the same as security. Turkey in the 1920s found itself surrounded by distrustful neighbors, colonial empires, and old rivals. The Bosporus and Dardanelles, the maritime gateways between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, remained under international control, demilitarized by the terms of the Treaty of Lausanne. This was for Turkey, a state whose capital had once straddled the strait, both a humiliation and a strategic vulnerability. No Turkish warship could pass without foreign oversight, and any fleet could potentially steam into Istanbul without much trouble. Meanwhile, the Allied powers maintained a wary distance. Britain and France had carved up the Arab lands of the former empire and were in no hurry to see a revitalized Turkey challenge their mandates in Syria, Iraq, or Palestine. In fact, tensions with France had flared during the War of Independence, particularly in Cilicia, though a peace was eventually brokered with the Franklin-Boulogne Agreement in 1921. Relationship normalized further in the 1930s, and Turkey would eventually sign a treaty of friendship with both France and United Kingdom, though always with a caution. Italy, a minor occupier of southern Anatolia during the post-war carve-up, had retreated from its ambitions early, but with Mussolini's rise, Rome again cast covetous eye across the Aegean and eastern Mediterranean. And then there were the Soviets. Following the Russian Revolution, Soviet Russia and the Turkish nationalists had briefly found common cause. Both countries were isolated, both revolutionary, and both targets of Allied intervention. Moscow had even provided limited military and financial assistance during the War of Independence. A friendship treaty was signed in 1921, demarcating the eastern borders between the two states. But this cordiality masked deep mistrust. While Turkey was determined to remain sovereign, the Soviets had long-term ambitions in the Caucasus and the Black Sea. Ankara feared that Moscow might one day turn its eyes south again, and with the aggressive policy of the Soviet state, this was more and more likely as time progressed. In this complex international landscape, Turkey adopted a doctrine of neutrality and balance. Atatürk's foreign policy, summarized in the maxim "peace at home, peace in the world," aimed to avoid entanglement in the ideological storms brewing across Europe. Yet neutrality did not mean passivity. Turkish diplomats skillfully negotiated treaties, economic agreements, and border settlements throughout the 1920s and 1930s. One of the most significant victories of this era came with the Montreal Convention of 1936, just months after our campaign begins. This treaty restored Turkish control over the Straits and allowed the remilitarization of the Bosporus and Dardanelles, a massive strategic gain that marked the culmination of years of patient diplomacy. Turkey, once crippled by the Treaty of Sèvres, was now renegotiating the terms of its sovereignty on the global stage. But even as foreign influence waned, the battle for Turkey's soul raged at home. The internal politics of the Turkish Republic in this period were tightly controlled, shaped by the sheer will of Mustafa Kemal and a small cadre of loyal reformers. The Republican People's Party, or CHP, Atatürk's political vehicle became the sole legal party for most of the interwar period. A brief experiment with multi-party democracy in 1925 and again in 1930 ended in unrest, religious reactionism, and suppression. Political pluralism was thus sacrificed for the sake of state building. To solidify national unity, the government repressed separatist movements, particularly among the Kurdish population, who resisted the erasure of their identity in the name of Turkish nationalism. Rebellions like the Sheikh Said revolt in 1925 were crushed with ruthless efficiency. The state imposed a policy of forced assimilation, centralization, and linguistic Turkification, particularly in the eastern provinces. Meanwhile, the economy trudged forward. With most of Anatolia devastated by war and infrastructure in ruins, the early republic prioritized state-led industrialization and import substitution. Borrowing models from Soviet five-year plans and European corporationism, Turkey developed heavy industry, textile manufacturing, and rail transport, often with foreign technical assistance but under domestic control. Economic independence was seen as critical to sovereignty. Educational reforms exploded under Atatürk's guidance. New secular schools replaced religious institutions, the Latin alphabet was introduced in 1928, and literacy campaigns blanketed the countryside. The hope was to forge a modern Turkish citizenry that would no longer look to Mecca or the Sultan, but to Ankara and the Republic. And all of this, the diplomacy, the repression, the construction of national identity, took place under the looming shadow of Atatürk's vision, a Turkey that would survive, adapt, and flourish in a world full of hungry wolves. When it comes to religion, the period was also a time of flux and turmoil. At the twilight of the Ottoman Empire, Islam was not merely a religion, it was the state itself. The Sultan in Istanbul bore the title of Caliph, the symbolic leader of all Muslims, and Sharia law underpinned the empire's legal system. Religious institutions, from the ulema to the Waqf system, were integral to the fabric of Ottoman governance, education, and social life. To be Ottoman was to live under Islam's dominion, regardless of whether you were Christian, Jew, or Muslim. But with the defeat of 1918 and the occupation that followed, the structure cracked. In the eyes of the nationalists rallying behind Mustafa Kemal, it was not Islam itself that had failed, but the theocratic state that had used religion to justify its stagnation and decay. The Allied use of the Sultan Caliph's authority to bless the foreign occupation of Anatolia only cemented this belief. The Ottoman Sultan, once the guardian of faith, was now seen as a traitor and collaborator. Thus, as the War of Independence was fought in the name of national survival, a new Turkish identity began to form, one based not on religion but on nationhood. After their victory, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk and the Grand National Assembly moved swiftly to sever the ties between Islam and the state. In 1924, the caliphate was formally abolished, ending over 1300 years of caliphal tradition. The office was deemed obsolete, anachronistic in a world that demanded scientific, rational governance. The remaining Ottoman dynasty was exiled. Turkey would have no sacred kings, no holy office, or divine rights. The reforms that followed were sweeping and uncompromising. Islamic courts were dismantled, replaced by a Swiss-style civil code. Religious schools, or madrasas, were closed or brought under state control. The Ministry of Religious Affairs was retained but stripped of political power and reduced to a bureaucratic tool for controlling state-sanctioned religious expression. The Arabic call to prayer was replaced with a Turkish version, and the use of Arabic script was outlawed, severing cultural continuity with Islamic texts. And most symbolically, the wearing of the fez, associated with the Ottoman Muslim identity, was banned. In its place, the Western-style hat became a statement of ideological allegiance. Islam itself was not outlawed, but it was domesticated, in a sense, suppressed in the public space. Faith was now made personal, apolitical. The state no longer served God, it served the people. Yet changes did not go unchallenged. Resistance smoldered in the rural countryside especially, and among conservative circles. In 1925, the Sheikh Said rebellion broke out in eastern Anatolia, led by a Kurdish Islamic cleric calling for the restoration of the caliphate. The revolt was brutally crushed, and in its wake, martial law and censorship tightened. Political Islam was firmly buried under the boot of the gendarmerie. By the mid-1930s, Turkey stood unique in the Muslim world, a secular republic where Islam was carefully managed by the state, reduced to a cultural marker rather than a political authority. Friday prayers still echoed in mosques, but they did so in a nation whose laws were now Western, whose alphabets were Latin, and whose ideology was Kemalist modernism. This balancing act between a Muslim population and a secular state would become one of Turkey's defining challenges. But in these formative years, Atatürk's message was clear: Turkey would look into the future, not to the past. Now, let us close this historical section by venturing a few years into the future. What was Turkey like during the flames of Second World War? Well, as the world plunged once more into a total war, Turkey stood at the crossroad of empire and ambition. Though officially neutral for most of World War II, the Republic found itself under immense pressure from all sides. The Axis, eyeing Turkey's strategic location on the Bosporus, wanted passage to the Middle East. The Allies, particularly Britain and the Soviet Union, feared that same passage falling into enemy hands. President İsmet İnönü, successor to Atatürk, who died in 1948, steered the country through this perilous era with a doctrine of active neutrality. While diplomatically balancing between Berlin, London and Moscow, Turkey simultaneously undertook a quiet but serious military build-up. The army was mobilized, defensive lines were reinforced across Thrace and eastern Anatolia, and German and Allied envoys vied for influence in Ankara's halls. Though Turkey signed a friendship treaty with Nazi Germany in 1941, it also maintained trade agreements with the Allies and later permitted Allied airbases in Adana. By 1944, with the Axis crumbling, Turkey severed relations with Germany and eventually declared war in early 1945, a symbolic act to secure a seat at the post-war table, rather than a commitment to battle. Yet even in neutrality, Turkey bore the burdens of war. Massive rearmament strained the economy, and widespread rationing triggered hardship. In 1942, the controversial wealth tax, or varolek vergesi, targeted minority communities and deepened ethnic tensions. Meanwhile, fears of a Soviet push into the Turkish Straits, especially after the Red Army reached the Balkans, would shape Ankara's posture for the following decades, only strengthened by the Soviet acts in Iran and Eastern Europe after the end of the war. In the end, Turkey emerged from the war intact, bloodless, but very untired. The old world was gone, and a new one of blocs, ideologies, and nuclear threats had begun. But we plan to change that. Our campaign begins amidst the struggle to strengthen ourselves. From Atatürk's sweeping reforms to the desperate push for modernization, we inherit both hope and hardship. The world around us will burn, and this time we will join in with a torch. So prepare yourselves, for what lies ahead will test our patience, our planning, and our steel. Once again, welcome to Turkey 1936 campaign in Hearts of Iron 4 Black Ice. Let the journey begin. With the introduction and history behind us, we can start looking at the game proper. So, we can find Turkey in the list of the minor countries over here. You can see that our leader is Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. Ideology is social democracy, government social democracy. The elections will run in February 1939 and the ruling party is CHP. Kemalism is an ideology that contains similarities to both nationalism and socialism. The main fundamentals of the ideology are republicanism, populism, nationalism, secularism, statism, and reformism. It is founded by Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the first president of Turkey. Brief history. The youthful Republic of Turkey has finally shaken off its historic Ottoman past. Under the leadership of Mustafa Kemal, the old ways are being consigned to history, and a newer, more modern Turkey is slowly emerging. Does Turkey's geographical position mean that it is well placed to capitalize if war once again breaks out in Europe? Will she be able to defend herself if attacked by any of the major factions? And our traits here, Cumhuriyet Halk Partisi, yes, that's our CHP party. Factory output and local output a slight bonus, but justify war, go tension limit, join faction, lend lease, send volunteer tension limit. Yes, we are pretty much neutral. We can guarantee other ideologies and lowest world tension with guarantees. Can justify war goals. Yeah, we don't have much in the way of policy. I think we're also forcibly neutral. We'll have to address that quite aggressively if we want to join the war in any near future. Our main traits is expand the Sadabat Pact. One can never have enough friends. Peace at home, peace in the world. We must stay away from major conflicts, yet look for friends to stand together against aggression. And the Montreal Convention, which has no description. Alright, we'll select the country. And here we are. The beautiful country of Turkey. I guess you can see it's pretty much today's border. There's, there were some minor changes, I think, but this is the Turkey that we know today. So we've already looked at this. There is a number of traits here, but we're gonna go through them in the actual game. I just wanted to address that we are playing on the Black Ice difficulty, meaning we are going to have as many penalties as the game is willing to give us. Political power gain lowered by 20%, production efficiency cap lowered by 10%, lack of resources penalty increased by 20%, factory output lowered by 10%, max planning factor lowered by 25%, daily opposition party support is increased by 0.02, and factory output factor is minus 5%. I actually don't know what a factory output factor is. It's actually probably how fast we're building factories, I guess. Custom game rooms, we're gonna look at them. We have everything enabled. I also enabled the historical unit spawns, which make Germany a little bit stronger, but they are also happening in England and in Soviet Russia, so it balances out as far as I know. We have the historical routes for all of the countries, so we're going to apply that, and we're going to play with historical AI, which is recommended. Now there was also a way how to boost the actual countries, and I thought that I never used it before, but I think it might be fun to give a little boost to Germany and all the other major powers like Soviet Union, United Kingdom, France, and United States. We'll see if we can do it. I don't want to give them any major boosts, because that would mean, we're already gonna be a second fiddle to the war, and by giving them even more power, we're basically making it even less significant that we are joining. But I would still like them to be, the battle of the giants, and us sort of playing our small role, small operations, small scale operations, stuff like that. So we'll see how it's gonna go. Anyway, with that said, we're gonna start the game and see what the game has to offer us. Welcome to the game, everyone. So, right off the bat, we're gonna start by looking at the difficulty, which is what I was talking about a little bit in the part where we looked at Turkey. Well, the previous part, basically. So, what we want to do here is we can actually set some free equipment, free convoys, free fuel, and division spawns. I'm actually not gonna play with this. I don't like it because it makes very little sense. But what I would like to do for Axis, Comintern Allies, and Daitwa Kyoeiken, we are gonna give them a little bit of bonuses. Not gonna go, crazy with anything, but let's just give them a little bit of a boost. You can see that it's just, slight bonuses to make things a little bit more interesting. You can go really crazy with these, I think, when you go over, production efficiency cap plus 30%, entrenchment speed plus 50, but we're just gonna give everybody a little bit of a boost. I don't want to go, again, too crazy, just make it a little bit more dynamic so that, it is still fair, because everybody is going to get a little bit of a bonus, except us, of course, but I never really played with these before, and I'm interested in seeing what kind of effect it's going to have on the game. Now, This is nothing major that would change the game drastically, but it's gonna, basically we're gonna see a little bit of a strengthening of everyone. We're gonna ignore neutral and South America. Let's just do it for the main main parties that participate in the war that we're gonna join. Alright, so everybody has it the same, you can see, except South America and neutral, which is what we want. Alright, so this is it. We can now close it, I think, and we can start looking at our situation. So as usual, this is not exactly a tutorial campaign. I plan to do a proper tutorial when we play as Italy, which is going to come soon enough, probably when the next version of Black Ice is published. But for now, I'm still going to go ahead and explain everything in detail. So let us start by section 1, which is our country itself, our political setup. So we have a huge amount of potential ministers here for each section. There are a number of them. We're gonna have to go through them as we'll play, but many of them are actually extremely important. Who will we get and when is gonna really come out of the other pain points that we're gonna address as we're gonna go through. We have research and production parties here, which we're going to use to design our, equipment and stuff. Internal policies, these are actually way more impactful than in vanilla. They played a lot with them, so let's go through them so that you get a little bit of an idea. So we have the policy of isolationism. Right now, it means that we get consumer goods factories 35%, and the minimum is set to 30%. Research speed is lowered, so is construction of civilian and military factories by 40 and 45%. Jesus Christ. Assembly's construction speed minus 45. Dockyard, shipyard, subyard, all of them are lowered by 45%. Civilian to military factory conversion speed cost 40%. Factory output and dockyard output lowered by 2%. We get less production capacity per air, tank, and artillery. Artillery assembly plants, alright, and there's more tensions and everything, and fuel capacity is lowered by 30% and retention by 5%. Alright, so this needs to change as fast as possible. I would like to get to early mobilization. You can see most of those penalties disappear really quickly. You still have a little bit of a penalty to civilian factory construction speed, but the rest is much better. However, world tension must be at least at 40%. We have completed a focus free market economy. One of those needs to be true. Either 40% world tension at war or has completed focus free market economy. And one of the following must be true. At war, more than 15% world tension, current ruling party is fascist, communist, or monarchist. So none of these are actually eligible for early mobilization. So that's a problem. We'll not be able to do that. We can get to civilian economy, but early mobilization is going to be an issue. We just cannot mobilize until we get in war, basically. Alright, well, that's something that really hurts right off the bat. We'll see how that's gonna go, because you guys voted for retaining the Kemalist principles, meaning that we are not gonna go fascist, communist, or monarchist. And with that said, this is beyond us, so we want to find a way how to circumvent that. Okay, level of nationalization. We have key industries nationalized, which gives you a little bit of a bonus and penalties. We have slightly lowered speed of civilian factory construction, but increased speed of military construction. Dockyard construction capacity also lowered by 2%. Research speed slightly increased by 1%. Political power gain goes down by 1%. Production efficiency, growth, and retention is increased by 6%. It's actually pretty good. Factory output lowered by dockyard output increased. So, this is a game of a chicken. If we went to central plant economy or most industries nationalized, it would go even higher. Now, then we have FDI regulations. Foreign investors are tolerated. That's not bad usually. I don't tend to change these much because again they give you penalties and you can go through them if you have an issue, a specific issue that you need to address. But sometimes it's not necessary. This one, however, is a terrible thing. Military mobilization, we have a reserve army. This needs to be switched to general mobilization, or at least a standing army as fast as possible. Because look, we get a little bit more political power and lowered attrition, but attack and defense of our divisions is low by 80%. Same for recovery rate. Any performance of our navy is low by 30%. Aircraft, 40 to 65% penalties. That's not great. So this needs to go. However, again, there is a number of things that you need to get. So we can, for example, get partial limited mobilization if we get partial mobilization, which severely reduces all of the penalties. But eventually, you just want the general mobilization or your army is completely useless. It also takes a lot of time. If we want to switch from reserve army to general mobilization, we need 63 days. But there are modifiers have to lower this time. It's gonna, go through these on its own, and I think that the moment you declare war, you basically get an option to mobilize if you want to. Training standards, medium standards, that's not bad but not great. We would need at least average tax or higher to get to high standards, which give you a little bit of organization, recovery rate, and naval organization. It's not bad, not an issue really. Then we have officer training standards, basic officer training. Alright. Extensive officer training would be better, but we would need a number of things. Have at least 5 unit leaders with a skill of 3 or higher. Alright, well, we don't even have that, so that's not something that we can work with right now. We have a regulated press. Alright. Censored press, state press. It moves towards more political power and ideology-driven defense, but costs consumer goods. What helps with weaker stability? That's not that bad. Security policy, minor restrictions. Restrictions, where does it go? Martial law, lower stability. Civil liberties first. Alright, it's actually not bad. It would give us a bonus to stability, but it hurts us when it comes to intelligence and subversive actions. Education policy, low investment. Oh, this one is really bad. If we could switch this, oh my god, it costs 500,000 political power to get higher. Well, okay, at this point we get lower monthly population and food extraction factor, and all buildings construction speed is slightly lowered, but political power gain and consumer goods factories are not bad. However, look at that. If you go to high investment or excellent investment, I think high investment is what, for example, Germany has. You get a bonus to research speed, experience gain, production efficiency, weaker stability also, but you get decreased factory and dockyard output, and it costs consumer goods factories and gets progressively higher with excellent investment. Alright, then we have industrial tariffs. No tariffs, low tariffs, we have average tariffs. Alright, that doesn't really change anything, it's a medium option for us. Free trade. And free trade actually has also a couple of options. You can switch it to export and protectionist economy if you want to. We are at free trade, so really in the middle of it. 50% of resources and or go to market, same with food. Alright. Tax policy. We have low taxes, which is good, more political power gain, but factory output and dockyard output is lowered. If we had average taxes, we would get rid of all the penalties and bonuses, but we get extra weaker stability bonus, which is really good. I keep mentioning these stability bonuses, but it is because stability in Black Ice is very important, but it fluctuates a lot. So it is good to keep it at 100%, but mostly you're interested in the weekly change. Currently we have plus 0.1 weekly, which is good. especially since we're going to be joining the war later on, so stability is going to be important for us. It can go way higher than 100%. You're capped at 100%, but the modifiers can go up and down. And usually countries tend to have big issues with stability as the game progresses. So keeping an eye on stability is really good. Taxes will help with that. Not gonna say they won't. Foreign recruitment, we actually got volunteers. Not bad. I think that we might go higher a little bit. The foreign recruitment encourage will give us more manpower. Non-core manpower 1%. It's actually pretty useful, but cost consumer goods and civilian factory use. Then conscription policy, we have a 1-year draft. We are okay with that for now. The game has a massive penalties as you expand your draft to pretty much everything. Even at a 1-year draft, we already have penalty to factory output, dockyard output, and recruitable population. Then you have the service age bracket, so these work in tandem. 19 to 30, again you can see that's not that bad, we get 3% recruitable population. So basically, if you think about it, this is a modifier on top of your service age. So if we, for example, go with an expanded draft, whatever we get from the service age would be increased significantly by 20%, but we get huge penalties to output and vehicle war support, political power, and other things. So again, the age bracket is the percentage you get out of your population, and again, it hits you with progressively higher penalties as you go, especially stability is painful. Now then we have female labor. Women are allowed, which is good. Women encouraged actually helps with recruitable population dramatically, but you start seeing some penalties. War bonds, we don't have any. That's understandable, and foreign policy is neutral. At least we're not isolationist here. Okay, then there's two major things here that we need to look into: lack of food and lack of fuel. Neither one are an issue, but if our food or fuel drops to a certain degree, we're going to have progressively higher and higher penalties from this. So we need to keep an eye on it, though that is more of a running thing. Now let's look a little bit at our country modifiers. So mountainous country. Special Forces weight of mountaineers is lowered by 0.5. That's actually pretty good. I was thinking that our army should be, since we're going to be joining the Axis, we're going to have to attack through the Caucasus. So having a small yet highly effective and well-trained Special Forces based army like mountaineers would be really good. And this is actually pretty good. Neutral foreign policy. Neutrality is sometimes viewed as a craven stance, but this nation trusts that when the dust settles, those who didn't take sides may be better off than those who did. Ottoman debt. It is still here. Consumer goods factories 20%, research speed lowered by 5%. Underdeveloped army. Division attack, motorized attack, mechanized attack. All of them lowered by 10%. And attack on core territory has additional 5% penalty. Horrors of past wars. Recruitable population lowered by 10% and vehicle war support lowered by 0.1. Turkish military staff. We get a bit extra planning speed and infantry division defense, but we get penalties to land doctrines, air doctrines, and army experience gain. Low literacy. Research speed lowered by 10%. Electronic speed research lowered by 5%. And winter heating, that's a modifier that pops up every winter. More consumer goods needed, more civilian fuel consumption, and less rations are actually produced. Alright, so that covers the modifiers, and now let's look at the tree. You can see that there has been a lot of work done on Turkey. We're gonna go through these more extensively as we play, but there is a couple of things that we will need to start with. Now, here is where we are gonna go, and I have to be really careful with this one because there is a couple of paths that you can take, but for us the goal is here. Join the Axis. This is what we need to get. to get join the Axis, we need Ittihad's Germanophiles, which go through the Court of Fascists, ultranationalism, written to the Ittihad, and then we go to military politics and a new path. Alright, so the new path is actually... Okay, unfortunately that is... You guys want me to stick with Atatürk's ideals, but I don't think I can actually. Is there another axis focus over here? I don't think so. Begin the talks with the Axis. Gains leans towards Germany. German military aid. Plans for Barbarossa. Because this one is under Kemalism. Right? No, this is new path. Atatürk's ideals just don't go with this one. Alright, so there is a limitation. We're gonna keep Atatürk at power, but we'll have to go through a new path, which changing political landscape, and from that one we need military politics, Rawa nationalist, pride of the military junta, return of the Ittihad, Kemalist officers, changing, but it's still Kemal, so ultranationalism, and then a court of fascists, foster Turkish nationalism, and where's the joint axis? Yes, we'll have to go through this one. So that's one that we have to do. When you look at it, that's about 60, 105 days, 150, 180, 210, 240. Okay, it's 12 days, so 270. So let's say about a year to make through this. To go through this path, especially because we have to start with diplomatic effort. So that's one thing that we will need to keep in mind. So from the moment that we want to join the war, it will take us about a year to get to where we join the Axis. So that's one thing that we need to keep in mind. Now, second, there is a Türk Silahlı Kuvvetleri, which is about war. We have special forces and a number of focuses here that we'll go through. There's the Turkish shipbuilding here. And then there are two areas which focus on the industry, and that's what we're going to start with. We have the option to develop the capital. It gives us a lot of options here. Oh, actually, this is connected with the army, really. Offensive mindset required the defense of Anatolia. Unforeseen consequences, really. Alright, so that's interesting. I haven't on purpose gone through this tree very carefully. I'll do it before the second episode, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about how we're gonna do this. Of course, the first thing that we need to do is the economy. So we have free market economy and state-funded and managed economy. We can go through the lessons of the 5-year plan, open Izmit paper factory, and through all of these down here to complete the second 5-year industrial plans, which removes the Ottoman debt. Or we could go with a free market economy, which also ends, I think, with removing... No, actually it doesn't, but, the penalties and bonuses from that are going to be quite interesting. So, I'll probably put on a new vote before episode number 2, whether we want to go with state-funded or free market economy. But to develop the capital, the Türk Silahlı Kuvvetleri, and those are going to have to happen all before we go with the new path, which will lead us into war. So this is our political situation. What I'm going to do, again, before episode 2, I'm going to look at your votes. I'm going to publish that right now. I'm actually recording in the afternoon before the episode 1 is going to go live. So we'll have a lot of time to look into it. Then I'll calculate what the time frame is going to be, and I'll also probably have another vote on when we should go through this one, how fast. I think the moment Germany attacks Soviet Union, so Barbarossa basically should be prerequisite for us to join, because I don't really think we should be joining before that anyway, because we'll have to have the dust settle and the cards be dealt before we join in. Also, we are in no shape to actually join right now. Okay, so that covers the politics. Alright, now let's look at research. As you guys know, research in Black Ice is not as simple as it is in other mods or in vanilla. The research slots that you get in the game, and you get a lot of them eventually, even as a minor nation as Turkey, for example, the research slots that you get are not all-purpose. We start with 2 all-purpose ones, which we can use to research any of our categories here, and boy is there more than in other mods. But then you get area-specific research slots. Like, for example, this one can only research infantry support and artillery, and this one can only research industry and raw materials. And the research slots that you get are usually sort of role-play specific, where you get either a university or a military installation or a naval academy that can provide some sort of research to you. For example, if we went with the free market economy, we would get a village institute research slot, which allows us to research industry and raw materials. And then we get Middle East Technical University, which, as you can see, can research way more things: infantry support, artillery, tanks, naval techs, industry, raw materials, and electronics. And I'm pretty sure that under, for example, naval, we will find some more here. Yeah, no, there's again the village institutes here. Okay, but that's not what I want. But I would have bet that there would be one here. Usually under Navy you get, alright. So we don't, which maybe it's somewhere around here on these all-purpose ones. Ah, yes, here it is. New equipment. So this one can research air tech, naval, and naval tech. So see, this is how it works. You usually go through your focus tree and you get more and more of these. Now, a thing that we need to face is that, for example, Germany, Soviet Union, or United States as the great powers, I guess United Kingdom as well, France, they can have 10, 12, even more research slots. We will not be this lucky. I don't think we have an ability here to actually search for... Yeah, wait, what is it? What is it called? Maybe we can highlight them just to have at least a rough idea how many we get. Research slot. We put slot. Okay, well that doesn't narrow it down completely, so let's try research. Research slot? Did that... Alright, actually that did highlight it, but it also gives us building slots. But we can easily identify it. So we have one here for industry and raw materials, the same one here because these are mutually exclusive. Then we get one that we already looked at. Here we have the one that we saw, which is for air tech, naval, and naval tech. Nothing here, nothing here, nothing here. Here's one. Again, industry and raw materials. There's one here. Support, artillery, tank, naval tech, air tech, western schooling. There's one here, which is used for industry, raw materials, and electronics. And that's that. Okay, so research is going to be a weak point for us, actually, which is something that I suspected. Usually, as a big nation, on my channel I already played Germany, Italy, Japan. You can research pretty much everything, but in our case, we obviously won't be able to. Now, there are areas where we are lacking, like tank technology. We almost have none. We have a tankette available with a 1939 variant. We have a light tank chassis in 1941, and we can get a medium 1943 chassis. We also have unlocked the ability to research armor technologies, which is not bad, and hopefully it will allow us to get something. But it is obvious that, for example, if you want to raise any good armored divisions, we will probably need to license tanks from Germany because we're joining the Axis. What I noticed though is that we have a pretty decent amount of armored cars, which are good in areas like mountains. We also start with a research slot already dedicated to infantry support and artillery. Now, usually I try to focus more on armor and mechanized, but in this case I think that we might want to, because we're going to be fighting Soviet Union most likely, and we're going to start by fighting in the Caucasus. We should create a core of units, or a specialized army corps, or even an entire army of elite mountaineers, which will be supported by these armored cars because they give them a bonus, and probably light or medium artillery support. We get a specialized mountain artillery, but I would also like to probably focus on either light or medium, which will be used for the other thing that we will have, and that's going to be probably a mechanized infantry. We won't really have, we can give them mechanized support, which is going to help with fights against tanks, and we can also look at some good medium anti-tank, which would be used against armored divisions that will try to attack us. But until we secure the entirety of the Caucasus and open up our way towards Stalingrad, I don't think we will have what it takes to actually research much more. You can see that there's already a ton of technologies here. We don't even have the 1918 armored car variant, so we'll need to really look into that. And Black Ice is really not great when it comes to under-equipping your troops, because even a simple infantry division has a ton of equipment that it needs. It needs, horse transports, light artillery, infantry equipment, field uniforms, cavalry equipment. Alright, so this is okay, they got a cavalry recon, support equipment, and recon equipment. And this doesn't even come close to what you can see on your elite units. There is a really good... Oh yeah, okay, we don't see a lot of it because we haven't researched it. So we don't have any mortars, machine guns, or infantry guns, which will be, something that we will have to give them eventually. We don't have anti-tank rifles. We pretty much have nothing, so our infantry is probably way worse than it could be, because each one of these, of course, brings additional bonuses to attack, defense, soft attack, stuff like that, so you need to keep it in mind. But yeah, I guess we're gonna try to get a specialized mountaineer divisions. We do have prerequisites for that. This, special forces weight is actually pretty good. We do have, unfortunately, already a lot of special forces, so we'll need to enlarge our army to be able to do that. So again, what we're gonna focus on mostly is infantry, which is something that I don't usually do. I try to really mechanize my forces really quickly, and here we're gonna do probably the same, but without the actual armored component. So we're not going to have truly a combined force. We're going to have mostly infantry and mechanized infantry. The good thing is that we got a ton of air. However, I don't have any slot apart from the all-purpose ones that can actually deal with that. So we could get a decent amount of Corsair supports or multi-role fighters, which are going to be probably way more efficient for us. So we'll have to, okay, again, we don't have even the starting fighter, but it would make sense for us to go from interceptors immediately into multi-role, and there, you know, we can get really decent results, even if they, you know, won't be as good as dedicated aircraft. For example, you guys get ground attack of 2.2, you would get 4.3 at the same level. So you would be better, but again, we're gonna have to prioritize what we do, because we won't really have enough for everything. And there are some strategic bombers, light bombers, naval bombers, but oh, we didn't have access to a jet fighter. Alright. I mean, if we will have the luxury to research something, I would probably go with multi-role and heavy fighters, because those are pretty good at repelling interceptors and enemy bombers, rather than multi-role and close air support. I guess that makes sense. Navy, I don't even know if we're gonna focus on at all, because while Navy is good, we'll have to really be specific at our doctrines. As Air Force doctrines, you get engineering, you get industrial development, and you get resource manufacturing. I can already guarantee you that for the first years, the 2 all-purpose slots are going to be focused purely on engineering, industrial development, and resource manufacturing, while the other 2 will, you know, of course, do infantry. And what was the other one? Oh, you're also industry and raw materials. Okay, so we'll have 3 slots, each one taking one of these 3 categories and 1 focusing on infantry. Now, there's also things that you can do here. We could switch immediately to assault infantry, which I kind of like the idea of, because the assault infantry, they have, I mean, they're much better when it comes to breakthrough. So, again, for the mechanized infantry, it would eventually be good to have them, though. Again, mechanized infantry, I think, is specialized, and I'm not sure if you can get, I mean, you should be able to get a mechanized assault infantry. I think they unlock their, yes, they do, alright. So yeah, we get a mechanized assault infantry. So we have to make a decision which one we're gonna go with pretty quickly. So yeah, that's that. That is research. I'm not sure if there's anything else that I would like to mention. There is a ton of support companies, of course. Not sure which and when we are going to use, but our units usually have a wide range of, yes, you can add a ton of support companies. So for the mountaineers, the dedicated mountain support company, logistics company is going to be an absolute must. If we're going to use the armored cars, maintenance company, combat engineers are really important. Not really a friend of the signal company, but they do provide an insane boost to organization, so those are not bad either. And then you can get armored recon. You will need to get the armored recon, motorized, mechanized recon. When do we get the motorized? You get that's recon company 1. Then you get motorcycle recon. That's a mechanized recon. And here's the light tank recon. What was the? Or did we already get it? I don't think so. It has to be here some, or we really are locked to mechanized? I was 100% sure that there was a, or do we have it already available? That's also a good question. No, we have just infantry and cavalry reconnaissance. Interesting. And then the question is if the armored cars, or do they get it from the armored cars themselves? Might also be an option. Oh yeah, okay. So here it is. So the armored car reconnaissance. Alright, we'll have to get at least the first 2 levels as quickly as possible, because we're not gonna produce this old thing. The Rolls Royce. Yeah, breakthrough, soft attack. Yeah, suppression, air attack. Yeah, much better one. And I suspect that the 1949 is gonna be even better. Yeah, breakthrough. They get pretty decent bonus of each one of these. Alright, and just let me compare. Let me just compare the mechanized recon. You see it here? To Constance 2.4. Okay, and the armored car recon 2.2. So mechanized is a little bit better, but mechanized will require way more research, and I think mechanized is really bad when it comes to fighting in the mountains. Yeah, they're terrible. Movement and other penalties, while armored cars surprisingly give a decent boost. Yeah, movement, attack, and defense. So getting some of these up is gonna be imperative. Alright, but then again, I think this is enough for research. And in the next part, we are going to look at trade and construction. Alright, let's now look at our beautiful country from the standpoint of our economy, meaning construction, meaning trade, meaning resources, meaning everything. So I guess I'm just gonna start by looking at trade. Now, BICE has incorporated a number of new resources. You actually get coal, bauxite, iron, which you can then use to produce aluminum and steel. We really are not doing good on any of these resources, which is bad. There's also food and there's also energy. So we don't even have enough energy at this point. Alright. So we have a huge issue with energy, meaning we're gonna get an immediate debuff to our production. And we don't have enough. Do we have any steel mills? We do have 2 steel mills which can produce... Okay, so each one takes 40 iron, 10 coal and produce 28 steel. Alright, we don't have any aluminum refineries or aluminum production places. We don't have any synthetic refineries or synthetic rubber production. Okay, well, that is a little bit of an issue. I think we'll have a land connection though to Germany, in which we'll be able to get a ton of territory here, and with it, hopefully, a lot of resources. Same with Italy. Hopefully they're gonna have Mare Nostrum, so we'll be able to trade with them freely over the Mediterranean, but we'll see. Still, this is really not looking good. Energy is a big issue for us, so we'll need to start by building a couple of power plants, but they're not really. Energy production 120. We don't get any penalties to producing them though, so that's actually pretty good. Yet only thermal plants. That's interesting. Alright. And the food production is also lacking. Alright, so we don't have any any food or any farms, or we have some, but we don't have enough of them. You can also build the steel mills, aluminum mills, which is good if you have enough factories to actually import, but they have done a great job at multiplying the factories, both military and civilian. So we now have 28 military factories and we have 65 civilian, of which, however, quite a large chunk, 45% of them, are going to consumer goods. So we don't have that much really. And just to call any happiness on anyone's side, Germany has about 120 military factories and about 170 civilian ones. So yes, our economy is severely lacking. And there's also one thing that we need to keep in mind, which is you cannot just willy-nilly produce tanks, aircraft, artillery, or cars and mechanized equipment. You need to have enough artillery foundries, engine factories, tank assembly plants, and air assembly plants. Plus you need also capital shipyards or submarine yards for your submarines and capital ships production. So we'll have to keep an eye on this. I don't think in the beginning it's going to be an issue, but engine factories are probably going to pop up really quickly. Same with artillery foundries, because they have a nasty time creeping on you. So you can see that we're producing light artillery, and it's consuming 2 units of artillery production capacity. So we'll need to keep an eye on these and produce them as necessary. However, we're going to start most likely with a lot of civilian factories, because they are the easiest to produce for us when it comes to the penalties. Military factories are way more expensive. There's also a lot of miscellaneous buildings that you can build, like recruitment centers, police stations, stronghold network. That's actually a new one. I never see this one. An extended defensive system of massive bunkers and strongly fortified positions, designed to repel enemy advances and secure key strategic areas. Well, that's actually really nice. Rocket sites, multi-charge large caliber gun emplacements. And then we have facilities. That's just probably for specialized projects, because we get the Götterdämmerung DLC up and running. And of course you have your synthetic refineries. They split the rubber and oil, so each one gives you a little bit of a difference. But the synthetic rubber refinery is actually really good. It produces 12 rubber points, which is really good. And right off the bat, it's really nice. But we'll see how. I don't think we have any rubber production at all. Nope. So in case you want to produce some nice cars and trucks, we'll need to import those. Yeah, I'm not really loving the economy. I love the simulation, but I don't love the economy. This is gonna cost us a lot of troubles. Or cause us a lot of troubles and cost us a lot of... I wanted to say this is gonna cost us a lot of resources and cause us a lot of trouble, and my brain just put it together. Alright, well, that's not great. That's not great, and we also export a lot of our resources into the market. The good news is that we have at least a lot of alloying metals, which we can export, so hopefully that's gonna be good. But yeah, food and everything else, that's going to be dramatic. Alright, next part is gonna be fun. We're gonna look at our army. So let's look at the army, what it has in store for us. Well, I already kind of think I know what we'll see. So we got 20 infantry divisions, we got 3 cavalry divisions, alright. We have 3 mountaineer divisions, and we have 1 garrison division. So let's look at the unit composition. So Piade Tymeni, a standard infantry division, has 9 infantry battalions and 3 artillery battalions. It has a headquarters detachment it has a cavalry reconnaissance unit, and it has an engineering company. Alright, well, this is not terrible, but also this is extremely basic, and the stats also look accordingly. Soft attack of 31.31, defense 57.76. I already mentioned during the research part that we're missing a lot of crucial equipment. We don't have any machine guns, we don't have any anti-tank rifles, infantry guns, stuff like that. So these stats will go up naturally, but still, the infantry divisions aren't anything excellent, and they will definitely not carry us. They might be used in a coastal defense, for which they might be actually a bit too overpowered, but other than that, we will definitely have to change them. So do we have any tools available right now? So what I usually do is I add a medium artillery unit, which is much stronger than the regular artillery. You can see, wait, does it show me the difference if I switch? It shows 1.95. Yes, okay. So if you switched to medium artillery, you can see that they have more defense, breakthroughs, soft attack, hard attack, and they do extra collateral damage and extra piercing. They use more supply and cost more IC. Requires horse transports, medium artillery, and field uniform. So it is a more complex artillery piece, but what I usually start with is I just add one, which puts the combat width to 24. We need to get as close to 75 as possible. What is also a good idea is to add a heavy artillery battery, which is extremely strong. It's much stronger than any kind of other artillery that you can get, and that would allow us to make this unit much, much stronger. It would nearly double its soft attack, increase a little bit of its defense. Breakthrough would nearly double. But considering we were talking about sticking to as little diverse pieces of technology as possible, I think we might just try to get rid of any medium artillery and go with just light artillery. Alternatively, we could switch all to medium, but I don't think that's gonna work for us. I also think that sometimes and I haven't checked this before, that the medium artillery is a little bit... No. What's the difference? It's not so big of a difference, yet you are about half the cost. Yeah, we're gonna have to stick to light artillery. We're gonna use those, and eventually we can give them anti-tank as an addition. So I don't think we have any use for medium artillery anywhere. Yeah, okay, so that's a good thing. So what we're gonna do with the Piada Timini is we're gonna give them another piece of artillery, and we're gonna give them the heavy artillery battery. So it's gonna be a mix of heavy and light. I don't think we want to do anything with the recon. If we went with a regular recon, we would cut out a little bit of equipment. Actually, a significant amount of equipment. I don't think cavalry equipment is that expensive, and the recon actually plays a huge role in Black Ice, so I would keep it to cavalry and armored cars. Oh, actually, that's also an interesting question. If we switched it out, because we would completely eliminate this thing, which honestly is not that great. So if we instead try to unify it, I think we could actually do that. For the time being, we could go with a regular reconnaissance and eventually switch all of our units to armored car reconnaissance. That would get rid of the cavalry completely. Because again, I'm going for efficiency here. We need to be as efficient. Larger armies have the advantage that they can use whatever they want, but we won't. So we have to be really careful about what we put on our units and try to unify them as possible. So in essence, you would look like this in the end. Which reconnaissance goes down, organization goes down as well, but we can add signal companies, soft attack and everything else would go up. Piercing, field uniforms would go up, horse transports, that's, you know, cavalry equipment. What? Oh, we have the. Okay, so we have also the headquarter detachment, which is a cavalry thing. All right, so I guess no need to do that then, because we're still using it for the headquarters detachment, and that one we definitely need. All right, well, still we know what we do with you guys. Now the Daji Tuai, which is the to-be elite infantry unit for us, the Mountaineers. Alright, so what we could do with you? Well, there is a special kind of artillery which is called the pack artillery, which is, I believe, a little bit weaker than the regular artillery, at least in the beginning. No, actually it has a little bit... It has less soft attack, but it gives more breakthrough. That's interesting. Though the light artillery is definitely going to be used, you know, it will be better to use eventually, because when we go through our technology list, I know for a fact that the mountain pack artillery is over here, and then you continue going down the line all the way to here. So eventually defense is double, soft attack is also much better. More collateral damage, less hard attack, that's interesting, but more breakthrough eventually. And more piercing. But pack artillery has certain advantages, that's why we might stick with it. And the advantages are that they are just great for fighting in the mountains, much better than any other piece of artillery, and everywhere else they also give a bonus. The normal artillery, as you can see, will give you a very steep penalty in the hills and mountains, while these ones are severely reduced when it comes to the pack artillery. So eventually what we might want to do here is add more mountaineers and more pack artillery. More pack artillery because that one is actually the essential one. That's what keeps the blood flowing. Okay, the math is not really mathing here well. Or I could just go like this. Alright, it would be even 25. Organization is a little bit of an issue, but this would work. That is a heavily armed mountain division. Of course, we will give them the engineers. The heavy artillery is a little bit of an issue here. It gives penalty in mountains and hills, but they give such a massive boost to the unit in breakthrough and soft attack that it is usually worth it, and we can eliminate a little bit of that issue when we motorize them, if I remember correctly. So that is a possibility. You will get the cars. What's your final numbers? Yes, attack 28%, movement 9.4, 22% bonus to defense. And there is also something that we can add, and it's over with, it's under here. And that's what we'll need to get as soon as possible. This one, Mountain Support Company, which adds additional massive bonuses to fights in the mountains and hills, so we will need that everywhere. And we'll get better mountain warfare equipment for our units, so this is going to be a priority. And then of course we're going to get a bonus to Mountain Infantry 2 and Mountain Infantry 3, so that will be good for them. There are also other things that we might add. I mean, they're going to get the mortars, you know, machine guns, stuff like that. That's the usual. Also the anti-tank rifles, but there are but I'm not sure if we have it here. They were specialized technologies. This one, I think. Yes, that allows you to get the commando battalions, which you can add as a special unit, if I remember correctly, to some of your units. But unlocking that is a little bit of an issue, and we'll also need these night visions. Alright, so yes, we are going to make these into elite units. The issue with the mountain units is going to be that we already have a big problem with the current size, and we have what, 4? 3. Alright, so we have 3 mountaineer divisions, so we need to build up our regular units quite extensively so that we can build up enough base layer to get more special forces. Now there's also technologies that can help with that, and there are certain things that we can do here. Oh, come on, I cannot initialize this. Alright, well, never mind, but you can switch certain things on and off. I think that this is modified by officer training standards, so if we can get those up, we can also get additional things, and some of our focuses might help with that as well. Then the question is what we're gonna do with you guys. I mean, historically, Turkey went through the war with a large army, which was fully mobilized and ready to fight at, I think it was like 1.5 million people at a certain point. But they had no mechanization. They had almost no tanks. They were relying strictly on foot soldiers and artillery pieces with a little bit of tanks, but they had no domestic production, nothing. So really, the cavalry, while obsolete, was still a thing. So we could try to go with a semi-motorized, turn these into a motorized units and have them like a semi-motorized core that would help with the breakthrough. But that's probably going to be an issue. In the meantime, we can do the same thing with them, or we can turn them into regular infantry units just so that we don't really have an issue. How many? I think we have also 3 or... yeah. So getting rid of these might be a good idea. And we have a garrison unit, one of those, which is strictly... garrisons are strictly for control of occupied territories, because they have a lot of suppression. But... They also have a pretty good defense, if I remember correctly. Yeah, they have a really good defense. So they might be great in case we want to build, for example, a coastal defense. We have a couple of ports where we could put them. In which case, I usually try to make them as small as possible. So something like this would be definitely enough, because garrisons have an issue. They cannot retreat. You cannot move them or retreat them in a normal way. They have a max speed of 1 kilometers. So the moment that they are overpowered, they're most likely going to get encircled and destroyed, because they just cannot move properly. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. And that's it. We also have militia units. But I don't think we have any of these, and they are terrible. They are terrible. Encourage local militias. Interesting. Though there is a type of unit here that we haven't spoken about, which is the light infantry. These guys are also good in the mountains and hills. So if it goes really bad, we might combine the mountaineers with... oh, I cannot... Alright, so let me see. If we switch to you to light infantry, what would that do? Each one has penalty to defend. Yeah, that wouldn't work. But they're much better in desert, forests, jungle, and marshes. I was just thinking that, if we cannot get strong enough pool of special forces, we might sort of combine them as a half-half. You would have mountaineer battalions and you would have light infantry here, because they would work penalty to mountains and hills, 3.5 and 4.3. Yeah, but we might just as well go with regular infantry then, because they would be more efficient in the long run. I have to think about it, because again, the size of our military is going to be a big issue for us. We won't probably have the ability to get everything we want, but we'll have to be smart about it. So getting more units, which would be intermixed with regular infantry, would make them overall weaker in the mountains, but having 2 units or 1 unit is what it might come down to, because Russia will never have an issue throwing dozens and dozens and dozens of armies at us. So we have to think about it that way. And then what else will we want? Well, I already mentioned that I kind of like the mechanization options that we get here. We might get a tankette and put them on some of our units, especially the infantry units, because the tankettes as a recon and even a support can be pretty good. They give some armor, so it's not as easy to pierce your units in some cases. We want to have the armored cars. They will also be pretty good. And eventually we might start including some light tanks or medium tanks. Now, licensing those from Germany is going to be a bit of an issue in the beginning, but later on we should be able to acquire some licenses, especially if we try to. I don't think we can actually... where's the licensing? Negotiate market access, okay. So, you have a base reluctance, their opinion of us is very low. And trade influence. So we can, if we could break that, we could eventually get some things. I don't really think that we're gonna ever go with something like tigers or panthers, but PZ-2-3 could be doable. The Noyes art would work well for us because we will need the mobile fast units. And again, that would come down to the semi-motorized or even motorized or mechanized units that we are going to build. But right now, we are going to stick to the basics. We will need to build up, as I mentioned, large-scale production of light and heavy artillery. We will need to put up a good production of infantry equipment so that we can use it. And start focusing on pack artillery build-up and support equipment for these units, because that is going to be very, very important. Alright, that covers the army. Now, when it comes to the Air Force, the situation is much easier. We have a couple of squadrons here. They are extremely undersupplied, but you can see that they are already motor fighter wings, which goes well with what I was thinking about, and we have a close air support wing. Now, I mentioned that before, I don't think we even have the ability to go away. I mean, we could produce them, but it seems like it might be a waste compared to the much better, the air attack, air superiority. The ground attack is just abysmal. Yeah, I don't think we're gonna do that. We're instead going to focus on motor rolls right at the bat, which means we will disperse the close air support just so it doesn't bother us, and we will focus purely on motor rolls. So that's gonna be one of the research things that we will need to get into once our economy is well and established. Other than that, we got nothing, but getting a couple of good air wings, I would say 10 to 12 would really help in the Caucasus region and in the future conflict with Russia, Soviet Union, because, I mean, they will most likely overpower us, but if we can put enough of them there, we might eventually achieve some sort of air superiority, at which point I might turn a couple of squadrons into ground support mission support. We'll see. But this is not going to be a complete priority. It depends on how well our economy is going to be doing. And then last but not least, there's the Navy, which is bad. but it's not completely terrible. I mean, we have 5 submarines of the second class, which I think is the... what is that? That's a submarine. That is a small submarine, isn't it? No. Yeah, I think it's a small submarine actually. Yeah, we have small submarines, alright. But they're all of the same type. So we could potentially turn them into something relatively useful. And if we can build up a number of these, we could dominate the Black Sea. And actually doing something that wasn't really achieved during World War II, and that is locking Soviet Union from receiving equipment through Black Sea, because Stalingrad was a big hub for the influx of Allied support. So if you can block off Black Sea and cut this area off, I don't actually remember if the Allies were shipping through the Turkish region, but they must have. Otherwise, there would have to be an air bridge, and I don't think that's possible. I know there was, possible routes through, Iran, Iraq, depending on how the front line was moving. But I think they were actually shipping through this, though. Italy, I mean, I have to actually check that. I know that a lot of supplies were coming to Stalingrad, but I never really thought through where exactly. India is here, so there might have been a land route. That would make more sense, I guess. Well, either way, dominating Black Sea using our submarines might be good. When it comes to the other ships that we have, is really poor. We got a battlecruiser, the Yavuz class, which is just sad. It's weaker than some of the modern cruisers. Then we have 2 very small light cruisers here, the Medici class, and then we have a couple of destroyers and torpedo boats. The Kocatepe and Zafer, those aren't that different from each other, I believe. So they could be unified into one single class. Again, unification is going to be really important for us. Torpedo boats, I rarely am interested in torpedo boats. So whatever we're going to do here, it's most likely going to be protection of submarines in the beginning. We're going to try to modernize some of our units. I will not waste time on extensive research, but destroyers could be good. And these are all 1920 tech. 19. Well, we could try to get the interwar submarine if we will have time for it, but depends what kind of research slots we're gonna get eventually, because in the beginning it's not gonna be a priority. But I think a production of, we do have 2 naval dockyards, so good class. The Mile rails could be actually kind of fun. We could mine the Black Sea, the Bosporus, and do stuff like that. That might not be a bad thing. Not that it's gonna help much. What kind of deck gun are you using? 102 mm. Visibility is just crazy though. It goes really up. And you really want to keep it as low as possible. But the difference between 19 and 20, it's not so extensive. So we'll just start. Not the mid engine, no. It's torpedo attack 14, and you got 23. Yeah, okay. So we're gonna start with the gear class, and I'm gonna try to upgrade other ships to that. Alright, well, that actually covers the Navy, and I'm thinking if I have left anything out. I don't think so. So with that said, we might actually do the setup. And then we can just end the episode and start playing, because this is looking like fun. And we have a clear path, a narrow path, for sure. A very narrow, very even path, but there is a way how we can get into the war, and there is a way how we can make it happen. So let's think about this, let's stick to our goals, and let's make it happen. Alright, now that we have gone through everything, I think we can start with the actual setup and then end the episode. So, you guys had a chance to vote for the past 2 days on what we are gonna go with, whether state-funded and managed economy or free market economy. Turns out you guys really want the free market economy, which is what I would prefer as well, to be quite honest, because of the focus on military factories and the 2 research slots that we are going to get from this one. Also, free market economy also switches you, and that's something that I completely missed, to the civilian economy, which I believe is what we wanted, because we had economic policy isolation, and this is going to immediately help us with a ton of things. So inadvertently, you actually are helping me more than you thought. So free market economy is going to take 25 days. It's going to cost us a little bit of political power, but other than that, the effect is amazing. After the free market economy, we're going to go down this way. I might consider actually developing the capital too, but what do you have? Level of nationalization, that's going to give us the private control, and then we have the grand state factories. I think we're gonna focus on the free market economy first and then go with developing the capital afterwards, because we need to get rid of as many penalties as possible, and I would really like to get the research slots fast as well. So that's what we are gonna start with. When it comes to the research, we actually have to start with the usual. Now, there is a number of technologies here which are very good, like construction, but we are going to start with the basic machine tools. We always start with those, and then we are going to be led down to either concentrated or dispersed industry. I always go with the concentrated, and I think we're gonna go with that one as well in this case, but also the production efficiency cap and the tool maintenance. That is absolutely imperative. It's even more imperative actually than the concentrated industry in itself. So let's go for basic machine tools. A variety of newly developed milling machines can be used in military production, from the small and versatile types available to any machine shop to the large-scale advanced models that can push the technological limits. So production efficiency cap, efficiency base, and dockyard output. There you go. The second technology is going to come from the engineering, where we can get electronic mechanical engineering, which increases research speed. After that, it is a question of where you want to go. But considering the research speed is right here, we might start with that. The consumer electronics is also pretty good, but it's just like a small thing that helps you with the political power and base stability. However, the daily political power gain that's hiding below mass media is actually pretty powerful, because that one, scales with time, and it might be important for us. Still, electronic mechanical engineering is the first thing. We live in an age where electrical machines can no longer only warm and light us, but help us think and communicate. Electronics will be the key to military intelligence in the coming century. So research speed boost. Then you can only go with industrial development or resource manufacturing. Now, considering we don't have anything, actually we go with construction 1. What about here? We don't need fuel refining, I think. The construction polymers are actually pretty good. They help with construction speed. Would fire engines help with that? Do you help with resource gain? But construction itself helps more. All buildings construction speed plus 3% and civilian plus 3 additional percent. And you give 2. Alright, so construction it is. Improved methods and materials allow us to construct buildings, both civilian and military, faster. So let's get that. And then the fun part, infantry. Well, I think we have already established that we need to strengthen our units as fast as possible. However, I don't think we actually need to go with the mountain warfare first. What we need to go with is actually the light artillery, which will allow us to get the pack artillery upgrade and then further light artillery pieces, because the ones that we're using is basically World War I artillery, and this one is a massive upgrade right off the bat. So let's start producing more of these as fast as possible before anything else. So basic artillery refers to light caliber weapons such as cannons and howitzers that are operated by crews, which can project munitions far beyond the effective range of personal weapons. So we're going to start with you. Alright, experimental facilities, nothing really here that we would want at this point. Let's now look at you. Now we're having issues with electricity. But it says that it's coming from coal, so it might actually come from the fact that we do not have enough coal. I would like to, and this is gonna be a bit of a balancing game, it always is, but we need to figure out how to deal with this. So, give me a few days or weeks to make this work, but I'm gonna put you here, which means we will, do we need that? Because it's a steel minus... Well, okay, you know what? Let's go around this a little bit different. We're going to start looking at the equipment. So what do we want? What do we want? We got a ton of factories here. I'm not really sure we want the heavy artillery at this point. We can work with the trucks, because they will not change. I would like to start working on things that we will not upgrade, so that we have those when the time comes. Okay, we don't have any mountaineer equipment. So that's that. Support equipment, mountain, reconnaissance, cavalry. Field uniforms I tend to put in the beginning. Then garrison equipment can go here. And horse transports. Okay, horse transports are actually extremely important. Those are something that we will need to build a big stockpile of. So let's put them up. I don't mind spending as much on them as possible. I'm gonna put 4 on infantry, uniforms, and equipment. Let's put 2 on support equipment, 2 on mountaineer equipment. I'll keep 1 on garrisons, but 2 on recon, because that one is usually way harder to produce. 2 on cavalry. Let's put 2 on artillery, just because of... Okay, and 1 more on field uniforms. Alright, and we want to start producing the new submarine, Guru class. Oh, and I can only produce 1. There is a limitation in Black Ice how many you can produce per, or how many naval dockyards certain things can have. So these ones obviously are limited. So now we're missing 60 steel. Alright, that actually tells me immediately that we need all these 56. We need to start importing. So, thing is, we can start trading with Germany right off the bat. Because I believe that might be useful for us. And nobody is really producing any steel right now or aluminum. So I'll have to look into that. So we'll see how this works. we can start producing civilian factories, and 1 wine is actually as much as we can get. Alright, well that's fine. That is fine. As far as the armies go, I'm gonna actually do that off camera, but if we assign all of you into an army, then split you guys off. How many can be? Alright, so we'll have 2 infantry armies, which is not exactly how historically it was. So the Ottomans had 4 infantry armies, but you know, around 1939, so we might get there. So let me just split you in half. Where is the button? Here. Let's have 2 infantry armies. We'll separate the mountaineers, and the garrison is gonna be alone. And can we get you guys all into an army group? Or you guys... Well, actually you can. So General Jahid Toydemirkut command all 5 of our armies. Okay, so we can keep it like this for now. It's gonna have just first army, which is gonna be, or we're gonna call it maybe a Homad army. I'll figure out the naming for this in between the episodes. Anything else that we want to do over here before we start? We'll import probably more food. Nothing with the navies at this point. I look into those. Actually, I'm actually okay with this. Oh, we have only 2 spotter. Convoy rating efficiency, superior tactician. Well, there isn't any difference. I'm gonna put you on the submarines and the main navy, because I don't think we want to even split them at this point. Alright, so this is the easy starting setup, and in the next episode we are actually gonna start looking a little bit more on the gameplay, because we're gonna unpause. I'm gonna have to fiddle with trade a lot, because that one, unfortunately, in Black Ice is a little bit iffy. It goes up and down until it settles, so we'll have a bit of a time with that. But construction should be fine. Oh yes, I forgot about recruitment. So let's start recruiting 2 divisions right off the bat. We're gonna always work on that. Istanbul and the surrounding areas, unfortunately, demilitarized. We're gonna put you into Adana, and we'll have you on reoccurring recruitment. Again, we cannot really do anything with the mountaineers at this point. Alright, I think we're set. So, in the next episode, we are actually going to unpause and start the game. Again, we now know what we want to do. We're going to focus on the economy. We're going to focus on developing the capital. We might even focus on the army first. But once we finish these first 2 parts, I am going to go maybe after the research slots, because those are extremely important for us, and then we're gonna go to prepare to join the Axis. So, hope you enjoyed this episode. It was long, it was hopefully informative, and if it was, I'll be happy to see you throughout the Let's Play. We'll see how far we can take our beautiful country of Turkey before it ends up under the boot of the Soviets or the Allies. We'll see who gets us first. So, till then, you guys, take care.